And really, it's not about the scale, because, you know, this exhibit, this Biennale, it's been here for for a century. And it was before, it used to be only European, then it opened to the world, but we are the last one to actually enter the conversation. So I believe it was quite emotional, because it's not about, you know, the scale and the technology also, because we are still, you know, it doesn't mean that we can't be there, but we're still in the process of redefining who we are and what we want to say, you know, in sort of in terms of narration. But to see all this attempt from fellow architects, colleagues from different places, from different countries within the continent, is just really thrilling for me. I think it's amazing to have this dialogue, and probably it's possible because we're in 2021 and we have all this technology to, you know, to communicate easily, and really to see what everybody is able to put out there and all the reflection that is there. I think it's just going to be fertile, and that's just the beginning, I believe, you know. And it's non-traditional way of exchange, because we used to go to academic places, and we know, as a matter of fact, I believe we've all been trained abroad, but it's time for us to see the things a little bit differently, and to go in informal ways, and really to share what we know, and you know, to push the reflection. Yeah.
So Corantema, she said we need to share what we know. I think that struck me. What do you think we know that the world doesn't right now?
I think we are more in tune with who we are, how we live, and that makes us the key components in providing design solutions for ourselves. So what this exhibition is doing is putting our voices out there, and in some ways, that is what I do online, making African designers' voices heard, their works seen. Because if we're supposed to create a sustainable future, we need to have solutions that work for us. We also need to have our stories heard, and then have a body of knowledge that we can build on for the future.
And do you think that is more design based, or that should be more kind of like writing based, or that should be more exhibition based?
I think it's everything, right? Because publication is very, very important. When you're designing, if you haven't put it out there, how do you get the masses to learn about it or learn from it? How do we let the world also know that there are designers there who can address the problems that we have there, or designers that they can collaborate with, right? So I think they all go hand in hand. It's about designing and creating the solutions, and then also sharing that knowledge. And that knowledge comes in the form of books, it comes in the form of articles, and also it comes in the form of exhibitions, like what we're having
now. Okay, so Valerie, your work is a lot of wood. Yeah, you use a lot of wood and lots of kind of natural materials and things like that. I'm going to ask you quite a confusing question. I'm not trying to trick you.
Yes, sure.
But it's a confusing question. Now, given that we're having to project ourselves into a future, as Africans, because it's necessary to project a new future for Africa that is as highfalutin as possible. And then we try to reach there. And then if we don't reach it, we land somewhere. Just reach for the sky. If you don't land in the whatever, you land in stars, blah, blah, blah. So how do you see those natural materials building these future cities?
Okay, so I believe that first of all, it's always about anthropologic. So the way we build cities and the way we do architecture is always contextual. So I'm from Congo, I'm from the forest, my country is super green. We have 90%, it's just wood. So for me, it was really a shock when I grew up not to see this material being used. And I've read that we used that in the past, and somehow everything that was sustainable was quite replaced, because of course it's also something that is fragile, because you can have fire. So if you don't push the material, you won't have solution for everything. But then again, you have to think about sustainability. Everything doesn't have to be eternal. I believe that I've traveled a little bit, and I know for instance that in Southeast Asia, which has the same climate as ours, they just accept that sometime a building can have an end, but it's safe. It gave its purpose at a certain moment, because it's like art. You will find a way of expressing yourself. It's cultural. That's something that can grow. You can replace stuff. As a matter of fact, there is this thing that is done in Japan. So they build it, places for spiritual places that were made of wood. But every 25 years, they had to demolish it and rebuild it the same way on another place. So you learn the way to do it, but you accept the fact that, it's not going to last forever, because in every places of the world, you won't find stone, you won't find, you have to do with what you have. People know how to do it. In my village, from the village of my father, we use wood for it's been forever, but we didn't know how to push the material. We didn't know how to because it's so suitable for the climates. It's also something, because it's natural, it's actually proven that you feel good around it, because we're part of the, of all this natural world. It's not just us human being in a certain place. We know it's something that, I don't know, I'm a francophone, so I'm trying to find the word in English, but it's sensitive also. So we can grow it, we can replace it, we can, and we won't, if we do that in a very sustainable, responsible way, this is actually the future I want to live in. That's my point of view. You can push it. Today, you can do towers made of timber. You can do so many things. And the thing is that we're the first place with Amazonia who were able to export it, but we don't have the industry yet. So we just export it in a raw place, but we don't have the industry to use it, as units and to actually fulfill our needs. We know that, for example, that in North America, I believe 80% of the construction is made of wood. Why couldn't we do the same thing? It's just a matter of, innovation, and I'm trying to do with what I have. And in my country, for instance, we don't have an industry of timber and wood, but we have so many crafts that people are just, they have the knowledge, but they're feeling, somehow they have a complex of it, because they think that you only have to build in a way that has to be the Western way, So it's really something that I want to change the narrative, because anytime, even when it was little production, people were quite amazed, because they were like, okay, this wood, I know that wood, and I think it's beautiful. And I believe that you work with a community. And so you also brought, some, work and dialect. So all these things, it's about sustainability, bioclimatic, and also culture. For me, because of the place I grew up. If I was in the middle of the desert, I wouldn't have, used timber. But because I'm from Congo and it's really everywhere, and we have the strongest wood in the world, it's the strongest wood in the world, why won't we use it, That's the question, really.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that, but I'm taking from what you said, and I want to ask Corentin a question. Look, it's a winding question, Corentin. Our ancestors used to build buildings and allow them die as the owner of the building died, which was kind of the philosophy behind traditional architecture, growing and dying. And then we inherited in our near ancestry, our near colonialism, we've inherited an architecture that is built around the fear of our neighbors, built around, they're kind of keeping things away from it. Yeah. So how can we, how is it possible to reconcile these two kind of non-linear, non-coplanar ideas? How is it possible for us to reconcile this in our quest to find because our quest is to find a new architecture. We can't deny that. So how do we reconcile these prime philosophical points in our architecture? What do you think about that?
So when you look at, I come from Ghana, and I think this is also prevalent in, I'll say, West Africa and most sub-Saharan African communities, where we have the compound houses, right? So there was a specific way that we built and lived, and some, for the most part, some places still live like that. But then when we come into the urban environments, it's still individualistic, right? And we have these very westernized homes, and we have all these high walls around us that do not allow for, the kind of interaction that in the rural areas would have. And that came from this, colonization. We are at the point, like to Valerie's point, where we are trying to find ourselves again, trying to learn from the past, reconcile the two. And it only comes from trying, from experimenting, from learning from what we have now and then what we have in the past, and trying to merge the two. So you can take from the whole idea of the compound house. What does it do, right? It creates, there's a sense of family, there's a sense of belonging, and that needs to inform how we build housing, for example, for now, and how we even plan our cities, right? So when you think of even going to the bigger buildings, right, corporate buildings or the urban setting, we have to think of how we're making public spaces, or even how these corporate buildings interact with the larger urban fabric, right? So when you're thinking of even the ground plane of a corporate building, you're thinking of it interacting with the city, getting the passers-by to interact with maybe the forecourt of the space. And that is bringing the whole idea of the compound house to the larger scale. When it comes to residential, how we plan even the new kinds of real estate developments that are going on, we need to think about community. So it's not just about individual houses and families in each house, but how you even structure each building and the frontage. There's more interaction. There's more kind of informal way of looking out for each other. And I think as Africans, how we should really learn from how we lived in the past and bring that into modern society.
Okay, so would you say that we're on the right path then towards finding a form, being that you're able to reconcile those two ideas so succinctly? Are we on the right pathway because the basic problem, as I see it, that we have as African architects is that we have no real canon to borrow from. Mm-hmm. So basically when we have an idea that is in our heads and we want to make a building out of it, what we do is to go to Corbusier or go to Frank Lloyd Wright or go to Zaha Hadid or somebody strange and pick an idea, a base ingredient, and then you springboard from there. Or not. Some people don't do that. Some people do that, but the basic question is, there's no, because how architecture is, and it's a continuous lineage of work. This is the reason why Africa is underrepresented, because there's no African addition into that lineage. There is Hassan Fati at the apex, but his work is detached from our everyday kind of work. So would you say that, what would you think about having to be able to create like a canon from where other work can spring? What do you think that canon should be made of, generally?
I think my motto, being the person behind Design 233, is publish, 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 right? If we don't write, there's nothing for us to learn from or build on. And the examples are there. If we look at how, and I always take from, of course, where I come from, right? The traditional people knew how to live, and they still do know how to live. And if you study them, then you as a designer would respond better. You provide better solutions, right? I think the basic structures are there, but we've just dissociated from them. Mm-hmm. And borrowing from the West. And then why do we borrow from the West? As previously as a design student, if I was looking for case studies, of course you're in an educational environment, right? What will be the first thing you do? You go and look for books, right? Mm-hmm. What books do we have available to us? Mostly Western books. On the internet, it's, the various platforms, I'll say Arc Daily, right? Design, all these other platforms. And most of the projects there are, again, Western. So how do we even inform the next generation to think differently? How do we inform ourselves to really look at how we live, okay, and respond to that as designers? I think that's the biggest question. Because the structures are there.
Yeah, if you mind, I will add the fact that you have to unlearn stuff. As a matter of fact, once we graduated, I believe in different places, we had to master what they were actually teaching us. But at a certain moment, I was so shocked because they never mentioned Africa. Otherwise, it was just Egypt, But there was so many things to learn and see. So I had to do all this research by myself, which is terrible because this is what I really want, Archiafrika to. And, Corentina, your work is amazing because, we have Ethiopia, we have what is the northern of Mali, we have Zimbabwe, we have, many cities that were just destroyed. You can find stuff, you can find research, you can find archaeological artifacts. You can also be, inspired by just art, that would be painting, sculpture, all this kind of, production that have been also kind of stolen and kind of, it's like it doesn't talk, but it does, it's there in the museum, but it does talk, if you really want to. All this research is something that architecture is not a part of it. It's a cultural production. It's the first of the art. So if you are not connected to what have been done before, how can you, of course, you will just copy paste, and that's why you have all the cities that will just look alike with all this mix up of, Europe and now China, production of Chinese art. It's and this is terrible. That's why I think even if you don't succeed, because it doesn't mean that, it's going to be your first prototype is going to work and. Okay. But you have to try at least, and you have to do all this work of, unlearning and learning, just adding stuff. It doesn't mean that what Europe have made is not interesting, but what have we made also for ourselves, and this without, as you said, Quentin, without publishing, without research, without, experimentation, it won't work. We will just, be a recipient of what other people have done, and we won't have our own voice, And before innovation, this is my belief, you have to do research, because architecture, what I believe is you never invent, like you only always come from somewhere, because you do it it's not for yourself, you do it for a community, for user who are the user, and in a certain context. That will be a place with a certain culture and a certain climate. So those dynamics, if they don't work together, then you won't heal, you won't find, a voice. And even if people don't like it, I mean, people would say, okay, it's like you're bringing us to the past, but sometimes maybe you have to do that, because I've had this exchange when I was a student. I went to Korea, and this is what they did, Japan and Korea, because they also had this maybe smaller time, but they had to understand what they were before, so they could do innovation. Without it, you cannot. You'll just copy paste, and it will be just mainstream. Because we have so many things that people are amazed by our art. When you see all the artifacts, when you see all the sculptures, because it had sense, and when it had sense, because it was made by communities and there was a message there. And if it's just empty, architecture is not just form, it's how you have to be proud of what the craftsmen are doing, the community, even all the people involved in the building, how to say that? I believe you understood. But yeah, sure, I do agree with Corentina, because and maybe it's gonna take time, but you can already see stuff, you can already see some fellow architects. I mean, I'm looking at Niger, they're doing amazing stuff. I'm looking at East Africa. I'm looking at even South Africa. Even they've been the one that have been, struggling, I believe, more than we did, because we had at least our independence before, but it's going to take time. But if you don't do that, then the community will still have a complex of who we are we enough, what are we bringing here, on this globalization, because now we're in a globalized world. So what are we here to do, and we're building the cities too. So it's not just we're part of the process. That's why we're creators and we're architects, but what is our narrative there?
Yeah. And it's also about finding worth in the kind of environment you live in. If you don't if you don't identify with it, how do you relate to it and then even maintain it, right? If you have all these foreign solutions, right, how do you respect it? My thesis back in grad school was called the Kente Park, and it was all about finding, let me step back. I mean, most of the problems we see are in the urban environments, right? Mm-hmm. So it's about creating solutions that people identified with in the urban environment, because most of it is very foreign. It's from colonization, and then it sprang from there, very, very westernized. So if people can identify with the kind of spaces we are giving them, then they will understand it. They'll know how to maintain it. They will have respect for it, right? But if we're plugging, foreign bodies into our spaces, I think then we're going to get lost.
What do you think, James? I don't know. What's your point of view?
I'm standing back for now, but I'll give my point of view later. When you guys were talking, interestingly, it made me remember something I had written before. That it's an unpopular opinion, but it leads to another question, which is kind of a tricky question too. I wrote in 2009. I wrote in an article that there's nothing like an African art. That it was just a spirit and a couple of objects that represented that spirit.
Exactly.
So there were artifacts, but no art. in Europe there was art, but no real artifacts. So in line with that, it means that what we have in our traditional architecture is places to contain those spirits, which are kind of like museums and shrines. Yeah. So the European, the contemporary European, when he has his home, he wants to put an art piece. I mean, like the entire ethos of modern architecture was to put an art piece, and on Friday, you take out a new art piece and then you study it while you listen to Wagner. Yeah. But the thing is, that's not the African spirit. So the question now becomes, if we remove all the abstraction from what we do, who are we working for? What's the African of the 21st century in our minds that we're creating this new world for? Because if we don't have that guy or that woman, it's really hard to even make a chair for a person that you don't understand who he is. What are our aspirations in the 21st century? What are we looking for? Where do we want to be? Do we want to be part of this world, or do we want to not be part of this world? How do we want to live? Have you guys ever thought about those kind of things? Because I think those are the first principles that all work should really be about.
And that kind of speaks to what the Biennale's theme, right? How we live together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was the theme of the Biennale. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what do you? Let's start from Valerie. What do you think? I mean, like, who is the guy? What should we be looking for? If you say, because if you say, the guy is supposed to be 5 foot 2 inches tall and with a broad chest, or the woman is supposed to be 1 inch 5 whatever, who is the person that we want to?
So I believe we've all asked this. I mean, we had that interrogation, but what I've learned is that what they try to do, the modernists, it's not the answer.
Yes.
So there is no one person that would be, the African, I mean, it's a huge continent. Every time you move and you see that we have also all this variety of, diversity of culture, we have something that links us, definitely. But there is no, we have so many religions, we have so many beliefs, we have so many, way of doing, we have so many climates, we have so many realities, that there is no way to have, one type of who is the modern. And maybe in my belief, I don't think that we have to rush after modernity. This is my point of view. I think we have to heal space and to heal, communities. I think this is our work to do, because this is actually what, what motivates me, because I've been living in cities and places that were wrongly designed, and with so many things that were not working, that I believe it's time for us with the fact that why would I come back, after I could have stayed in the West, this is also a question, but the thing is really not something about who is that future, but all those things that are not working, that's also a path I want to, I want to follow. And maybe for me, innovation comes within, the climate and the environment pressure, because we don't have any time left. It's an emergency. So with that, we have to push, but not really to redefine ourselves, because there's no one archetype of an African woman or an African man of the 21st century. I don't think so. I think really it's something I can't.
I get that, but you see, the thing about that is that it also gives that plurality.
Exactly.
It makes it impossible for us to, because we have to we have to wear 2 or 3 hats as as this particular group of architects in this particular age in Africa's history. As being part of that group, we ought to wear 2 or 3 hats. First things first, there's no theoretical basis for contemporary African architecture.
No.
To create a theoretical basis, however, there has to be a target. Even if that target is a moving target, there ought to be a target. So that around that target, a theory is made that can be diversified within Africa. But as much as we're different, we're also the same. I mean, I've lived around Africa too. I find that I'm at home in South Africa as much as I'm at home in Egypt. Yeah, I find that so I find that when I look at, I feel the same spirit wash over me when I look at the pyramids and when I look at house architecture. It's the same thing to me. I feel the same emotions. So there's a similarity in spirit, but I think that we're not maximizing by wanting to be as pluralist. I have an R problem, as different as possible. I think first, I might be wrong, but I think first we come together as one. Then we figure out how to diversify. It's like an army, create a unifying force, and then turn it into like guerrilla warfare. And that's what I think about that, because trying to find each individual answer hasn't helped. And Africa is too big. And it kind of, it will take us away from a direct approach towards finding, because like, I'll talk about my own work, for instance. My architecture is very technological. Very, very technological. You think it's European, but it has nothing to do with Europe. If you look at it a little bit well, it has nothing to do with European thinking. But it just looks like that because I'm anchored within the technology of the time. We in the office, we ensure that everything we do comes from the time. Yeah, we don't paint buildings because we want to paint buildings, for instance. And I noticed that in your work. Your work is the dominant color in your work is brown and gray because you use wood and mud.
It's a consequence of my environment.
Exactly.
And if I had to work in another place,
it would change color.
Yeah, it would be different. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. So I mean, this is one of the things that I'm most proud about the selection of architects we have, because we're not making, for instance, brown architecture or, for instance, poor architecture. We're trying to create a new narrative for Africa that is based on materiality, is based on technology and things like that. So what that multiple point of view creates is that brown architecture, that everybody needs to have one color eventually. It's by color that it's known as African. It's by its material, it's by the poverty in it that is known as Africa. We need to step out of that and figure out how to make something like an iPhone that all of us have. And when we go, we have different networks. So it produces different kind of quality of calls. That's what I think.
But that's the process, actually. I believe that's not the form. At the end of the day, people will like this or will like that. But as a sense, the architecture, when they come within, they understand it's working. It's right. Because it has been, you understand the dynamics of who is using the space, the families, the extended families, the way we use, the way we cook outside, the way it's always about the human, the way we will see it. I mean, we will meet as a community, the way children learn, the way we put our elders, the way we heal, the way we the spaces where we will have our spiritual also gathering. All these things has to be done by African minds. I'm not telling it's a color of skin or something, because some people, it's really understanding you grew up there, or you have to understand it the way we have aspired. We know how Western people live, but some people that are doing some big project in Africa, they don't know how we live. I think it's the process, not the form. At the end of the day, you can have any kind of material, any kind. I mean, it's always better if you use local solution, because you will enforce the local economy. That is, I believe, in the sense of sustainability, the best thing you can do, because you also give back. It's not just about importing something that is done kilometers away. But when you don't have the trust, at least you should have the process of knowing who is the user and knowing how you can heal a community or family. What are the interests? It's all different. It's all different from the way you live in South America or in Europe or in Asia. The way we do live, I mean, sub-Saharan Africa is something that we are all Bantu people, or cousins or something. So we have many things that we share, but within the process, not in the form and in the colors. Because if you go to the forest or the desert, or to the seaside, it's different. But the way we connect with space, yes, it's the same, I believe. Yeah.
So again, African art, there's nothing like an African art but a spirit.
Exactly.
So that's, I think you just recapped what I said earlier.
Yeah.
But I think Joe had wanted to say something before he disappeared.
Yeah. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Joe. I think you're muted.
I know.
He's
yeah.
We can't. I think you're muted. We can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
I think he's asking if we can hear him now, but
oh, we can't hear you. You have to put.
We can't hear you.
Have to put the microphone on.
oh, it's too bad.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
No, I think he has to go out and come back in, because I think when he came in, he didn't accept to use the Wi-Fi for his voice.
For the sound, yeah.
So yeah, I think so. Yeah. So when he comes back in, I'm sure he'll accept.
So one of the things, one word that I was thinking of when Valerie was speaking was authenticity.
Yeah.
And I think that is the basis of it, that you are being true to yourself. You're being true to the people you're designing for.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then the place where you are designing for as well. So if you look at how they live, if you look at the climate, you look at the materials available, you can build on that. I think the field of creativity is so wide, it's just open for you to play with. But I think that the basis is being true to where you are at that moment and responding to it. Then you can provide real solutions.
In addition to that, I think my biggest issue right now, I think my biggest pet peeve right now is the scale at which we're operating.
Yes.
The scale of research. I personally have a problem with, not a problem, but it's difficult for me to find small solutions. I love to see when people do small experiments and small solutions, but I can't do it. I maybe because I think when I travel through, because when I go from project and I travel through, I see that we don't need small solutions now. We need grand solutions. Small solutions happen when you have had your grand solutions. Then you go into the micro scale. So we have to put our best mind into making that macro scale, that large scale. So I don't know how. Okay, Joe is back. Still we can't hear you.
No sound.
Still no sound.
Wow.
What's happening?
But concerning the scales, I believe that everybody has his path, there, for example, when you take the Pulitzer Prize, you'll have some architects that who have done, like cities and big scale. And then you also have the small one, like for instance, there are fellow Australian architects who work on also our Aborigine, our architecture, passive architecture. There's no small or big, and the impact was was international, and publication was there, and we learned from that too. So I think it's all converge. You can converge to the same. You can tackle every solution: the micro, the mega scale. Interests are different, skills are different, sensitivity is different, and that's the beauty of it. Because if you see, for example, New Road exhibit, it's not, we don't have the same interests, we don't have the same way of responding to the problem. But we are all thinking of trying to find a narrative that works for us and for the people we're working for. That's really the thing that we can share. And sometime maybe in our own I would say our own professional path, we will change. It's not something that is today I'm interested in that and tomorrow I might be interested in something else. But I don't think that we all have the same we don't do this job for the same reasons too. What motivated a person is more an artist, another one wants to work with community, and another one is more into materiality and wants to experiment and do stuff. And really it's all this variety that will work for us. But the most important thing is to have a platform where we can share everything. And it didn't exist before. There was no one exhibit with all the African architects. I've never seen that. There is design in the and this is less about architecture but more about art. But maybe that's something we have to do now, because we can see, I believe there are many of us out there, but we don't know them. We don't know them. To share what we know, because maybe tomorrow I will work on, on a skyscraper, I don't know, and I'll work with James, who knows, and if tomorrow you have to work on something that is more, like a community center, you work with me. Mm-hmm. So all these things is just to know that we can share, but one person can't have a solution for everything and can't have all the same interests. It's impossible. And I believe it's a little bit, we need to have more humility about that, and to say, okay, what I know, and I want to do it in the best way possible. But then I admire other people who are tackling other problems, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's yeah, correct.
Yeah, I was going to say, follow up with what she said about, this kind of dialogue we're having, which probably hasn't been, done before enough. And
not enough. It hasn't been done before. This is the first of its type.
I didn't want to, get ahead of myself.
I tell you that for a fact. This is the first of its type.
And even more so, it hasn't happened on the continent. I remember Joe and Archiafrika are the first, I'll say organization that exposed me to that kind of dialogue when we had the conference in KNUST. I can't remember the year. It must have been maybe 2006, I think. And that had such an impact on me. It was a never happened before event that you were having architects from different parts of, the continent and even I would say the world congregating in one room and talking about what African architecture is. What is it? That was a question. And so we need more of that. And to your point about, the scale, macro to micro, it needs to be done at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I feel we also don't have, as African architects and designers, we don't have a voice when it comes to, let's say, policy and, the government side as well. And that's where the big projects come from, right? It comes from all the developmental policies and projects. And we need to have more of a voice. Architectural organizations there in the bodies need to have let their voices be heard locally on the continent as well, as we look at, having our voices heard on the international platform.
I'm going to. So maybe we should plan a coup.
Yeah.
I mean, coups are all the rave now in Africa suddenly again. But
very contemporary.
So perhaps we should just jump on the train and plan a coup. Perhaps we should give ourselves, as a group, 9 of us, we give ourselves the next 2 years to not only exhibit globally, but to create large and small scale projects of certain repute and books and manifestos of certain repute, so that at the end of 2 years, there are 9 new manifestos of African architecture. Mm. There's also a couple of projects that, built or not built, can be exhibited as canons for a new African architecture.
Yeah.
And then we also find a way to push 1 or 2 people into the government that can help us to find this kind of developmental projects which can help us put Africa or create a new Africa for us. So, because we have to plan the coup. I think the problem that we have in Africa is not planning the coup. It's hoping that the coup happens.
A different kind.
A different kind. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, boss.
You even look like the guy in Conakry. You.
Yeah, but you're saying something though. But there's something about collaboration which is not happening enough. Mm. We are all in our little corner, and so this is really amazing to be in this kind of space where we are talking about it. And I think the next step is coming together. Whether it's even conceptual, we are thinking about planning certain cities, right? At least it's a body of knowledge. It can be done, or in the future or now. But we need to collaborate. We need to come together and think of solutions. Right? We, every, architect is there in their small corner doing their thing, and it doesn't help. Yeah,
it doesn't help. We feel isolated. As an instance, in my country or association, we're just 35 architects, and we're 2 women. Can you believe that? For a country of 5 million inhabitants, which is small, but still, you see. So before there was internet, and before Joe called me, I was just I watched all these Archiafrican YouTube videos I've seen, and this really that's how I understood we're all there out there, but how could we connect? So this is really a first, and I think it's amazing. So this platform of Archiafrika, it has to grow. We have to work on that. We have to put more data. We have to invite more students to. Joe, he was thinking about this thing. We were in Venice, and he said we should, exchange our trainers. So one should go to Congo, the other one should go to Nigeria, and the other one, we should find, a way, because sometimes our traditional university are not, we don't have the fund. And even as you said, the power or, our politicians are not trying to find, as they used to do back in the days, the skills there. They're not, it's quite cynical. So it's out there. Maybe somebody will say, okay, do you know about that platform? Do you know about that architect? If they see now the visual, now they will be more interested. But going back to university and trying to see who is going to graduate, it's not working anymore. It's not working. And I think this is the only way, because in my country, it's not working. I'm just telling you, so that's true. And they're just keeping on bringing foreigners to build big infrastructure. So that's just the way it is. And once they see that, your voice is heard, and thank you, ECC. So it's not the end of all this thing of trying of, being recognized in the West and coming back. It's still there, but we have to do more for the continent. And within all this exchange, collaboration is key. We are, sapiens, we just about collaboration. We have to collaborate. If we don't, then...
I'm going to the room, I think.
So,
I think you're totally right about collaboration, because we've not. This is an opportune platform for us to come together to make. But we've got to make things.
Yes,
we've got to plan things. We've got to, because the output has to be always in. For instance, like the CIAM, the Corbusier and his cronies. Cities around the world used the CIM manual to get planned eventually. This is what we need to think of, because Africa has had architects like Joe, architects like Hassan Fati, just luminaries standing alone, So Joe's first guy that is putting these guys together. So what we need to do is to make it into a battering ram through which work can be done, because the one of the most painful things is there's nothing. It's not like Africans are not intelligent. African architects don't know what to do. There's just nothing. We're too reliant on trying to build buildings and not trying to put down. Because again, like if I use a thing like religion, the reason why Christianity and Islam have lasted 2,000 years, between the 2,300 years between them, is because there's a rule book, there's an ethos, and there's a way to do things that has been codified and written down, and therefore that code is passed from generation to generation. They don't pass the faith from generation, they pass the code from generation to generation. So without a code, I don't see how we can make the impact that we need to make in this globalized world. We need to make the impact. We need to make for our people and indeed for the world. Because if we can create from our traditional architecture, sustainability as a problem is solved. The solutions are there. We just don't know how to unearth them from where we are. So James, I think that's yes.
James, can I say final few words for a minute?
Yes, please. Yes.
So okay. So I think that what I will say is it's good to mention individual names, but the point is the issues are so much bigger than individuals, and we have to learn to be self critique. The quality of, somebody touched on it earlier, the quality of the work being produced on the continent has to be of a certain standard. This is the same problem it's not unique to Africa, because even when I was practicing in the States, frankly, there's very few good architecture being produced in the States, but our problem is so acute that we can't follow other examples and say it is okay for the majority of the work to be mediocre. The majority of the work has to be excellent. There's no doubt about it. How do we get there is the issue. I mean, it's so big and it's a myriad of issues, but I think that architects need to realize that we are learning all the way till the grave, and that's something which I think African architecture training doesn't really imbue in us. We have to be open-minded and be willing to adapt and adjust throughout, our post school, even in school, starting from school all the way through practice, Somehow we think that we know it all. The architect knows it all. Fundamental problem, And so, I don't believe in this whole notion of new schools of architecture on the continent either. We need to have a panoply of new ideas, old and new. So the universities have to be reformed from within, And so you have new schools, okay, but we cannot reject the 60 years of old establishment either. They have to reform. I always use this example that if you look at talking about coups, if our first independence leaders had reformed from within, there would have been no need for coups, and the coups never created a better Africa anyway, So it's a quagmire. So I'm saying that we must support the old schools as the new schools come in, and we should reject the new schools for attempting to become a monopoly on new ideas, so that we need a mixture of old and new, and the people on the continent must believe. We have to show them the output. And as James said, it's not only about buildings, it's an attitude. When I start talking about all these African architecture businesses, I never use the word African architecture in one phrase. I always said an African response in architecture,
Exactly.
Because this locks us into edifice making, we have to have a style or something, and we know that's not what we are talking about. So, and the Western press will force us to have these kinds of conversations for hours, trying to define something which is neither here nor there. So let's be careful. It's not about a style, it's about an attitude, towards, and that's why I love there is the use of hip hop as a metaphor. Hip hop created the ecosystem for them to thrive, independent of the established music industry, and that's what we have to really understand. So it's not a style; it's the attitude that allows us to create this ecosystem for the work to be to develop in its own contextual and a unique way. So that's my thing. Let's not be boxed into the phrase, because once we get boxed in, we are locked in.
That's the best summary we could have. I'm going to just reiterate: whatever new is coming has to make the old work better. Exactly. If not, there's no need for the new.
Exactly.
Because we have a legacy of schools. In Nigeria, there's more than 60 architectural schools. If you bring a new school into Nigeria, I don't know what you're bringing it for. When the old schools are there with infrastructure,
that's right,
on a technical scale, and the infrastructure is not working because of maintenance, we need to solve that problem.
Exactly.
Architects are trained in a peculiar way, and we already have the institutions that can train those architects. We just need to reform those institutions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I stand against this new proliferation of new schools and closing down old schools. It doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Africa has produced architects for 60 years. There's a way to make architects. We just need to make that way sharper. yeah, I think that's it. So I'll be closing up this. It was very nice to have Joe here eventually. So I'm going to close. We've been here for an hour now, so I've taken 1 hour of everybody's time. Thank you guys for your time, and I think the take home from this is that we come together to form something, to create ideas, and would experiment it soon, because I believe that Joe would have an announcement for all of us soon. I'll let him do that in his time. Yeah, so thank you guys. Congratulations for being part of the exhibition. Congratulations on your work and on the passion that you have for the continent and for architecture. So thank you guys for allowing Joe and I exhibit your work. So
thank you to everyone too. Thank you to Joe, Archiafrika, and the ECC. It's been an honor.
Exactly.
And we know the conversations will continue. So we're looking forward to it.
The conversations have to quickly translate into output very quickly.
Yep.
Otherwise, we're going to lose the momentum. You know?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. Cheers.
Yeah.
We'll meet soon. We'll keep chatting on the group.
Listen. Talking about conversation from this Zoom call, I'm having another Zoom call with Jack Travis in North America, who is also talking about the Black aesthetic and all that. So I am talked out. So you guys, see you. I gotta go.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everybody. Cheers. Cheers. All right.
See you.
Okay. All right.
It's been recorded anyway, so it's